Hi everyone, welcome to another episode in You're My CommsHero, the podcast for CommsHero types. And I'm delighted to be interviewing one of my CommsHeroes that constantly inspires me with lots of different types of things that he's doing for his job. So I'm delighted to introduce Steve Hayes, who's the Director of Communications at Citizen. Thanks for joining us, Steve, and it's a pleasure to welcome you as one of our first guests on the You're My CommsHero podcast.
Oh, thanks, Asif. That's what a lovely introduction as well. You even promoted me there, Director of Comms, Head of Comms, but I hope so.
Well, we'll take that.
Have a word with Kevin, will you?
Well, we'll send this on to him. So, Head of Comms. So, Steve, just before we go into the main crux of the podcast, I'd like to find out, and certainly the listeners, tell us more about yourself and more about Steve and your role at Citizen.
Yeah, sure. So I've been Head of Comms at Citizen for almost exactly 2 years now, which has flown by because so much has happened. When I joined the organisation, it was still WM Housing, and it had a number of smaller brands underneath of it. It was a sort of group, quite complicated structure. And I came in just as the organisation needed lots of stuff to happen. So there was an amalgamation of that group structure that happened, a rebrand, which brought with it a new website, a new customer portal. At the same time, the organisation had a quite unloved comms function as well. So that's been my life for the last 2 years, really, has been working on that. It's been fantastic. But I've worked in housing, in comms roles for about 7 or 8 years now. So my job before Citizen was at the Chartered Institute. So I was the comms manager there for a couple of years. And then prior to that, I had an in-house role with Housing 21. And before that, I worked for Creative Bridge, an agency, and all of my clients there were housing clients. So that's really how I got into housing. And then before that, I was a journalist. So that was my first job. I was a newspaper reporter. So that's a sort of familiar journey probably for quite a lot of PR people is they go from newspapers to PR. And that brings us up to the present day.
Yeah. So agency side to client side then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, actually, do you know what? It's been really useful having all of those different roles. On the one hand, as you say, agency side brings with it its own challenges, as you all know, it was just phenomenal experience working for Creative Bridge. I had 3 clients that were all housing associations, and they could all have been full-time jobs, really. So that teaches you how to sort of manage your time effectively and the challenges of sort of dealing with clients. And then moving in-house is a different challenge. And I think it's probably, for me, that's probably where I feel most comfortable and most able to make the most influence, really.
Yeah, great. So, Steve, we've spoken a few times, and often what I've picked up in those previous conversations is you're very passionate about sharing best practice in comms, and that's one of the key reasons why you agreed to be on the speaker lineup for CommsHero Week. So why is the sharing of best practice amongst the CommsHero community so important to you?
I think it's hugely important in any discipline. It's hugely important to share best practice, and I think a lot of it is deciding what is making the decision that we don't have to hide everything. In fact, quite the opposite. The temptation is if you do something good, you think, I don't want anybody else to know about that because that's mine. And with certain things, of course you want to be the best, of course you want to save some things for awards and not give those away. But there's lots of stuff we do in communications, which is day-to-day, run-of-the-mill stuff that can be just done really, really well and make a massive difference. So to share those lessons and for us all to benefit from those is the way forward. And I think the background for me, has been that particularly in housing, comms is not always necessarily done brilliantly. In fact, you could probably extend that across the whole not-for-profit sector to a degree. And we're certainly not great at sharing things. So I am passionate about it because I think there's lots of stuff that we all have to do that are kind of core things. Things like internal communications in particular, I think is an area where I'm really keen to share some of the lessons that we've got from the last couple of years as Citizen. We're not a perfect organisation by any stretch, but there's lots of stuff there that's not rocket science. It's not really expensive. It's just stuff that anybody can do well, and it can make a massive difference. And I suppose I'm also passionate because I think, you know, it's about positioning comms and helping organisations to understand just how important it is to have a communications function which sits at the heart of your organisation, because, you know, there is a sense sometimes that it's a sort of fluffy add-on and something that's nice to do, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And I think we've seen, particularly over the last 4 months, you know, just how important communications is to an organisation functioning and operating at a level that it needs to operate at. Because if you strip all of that away, you're not left with a great deal, to be honest, and you're certainly left with a group of staff that don't really buy into what it is you're trying to do. So it's a hugely important discipline. That's the one thing I'm passionate about, us getting that message out there, so that organisations give it the respect that it needs and deserves. And as you say, it's then also about saying, what are the practical lessons that we can all share? That, you know, I have this all the time at events where you kind of hear a nugget and you go, that's awesome, I'm going to take that away and I'm going to do it. And that's what we should be doing. Why not?
Excellent. And so I mentioned in the lead up to that question, you're speaking at CommsHero Week. So what can people expect from your session?
So my session is focused on internal communications, because I think, you know, I've learned over the last couple of years and really throughout my career just how important that is. And it was a bit of a journey for me, because obviously coming from a journalistic background, you know, I was all interested in, you know, getting in the press and all that kind of stuff. And actually you realise over time just how important it is that you engage colleagues. And it's probably about the most important thing you can do, in truth. So my session is geared all around the power of internal communications, how to do that well, and some practical lessons that people can take back. Because I'm all about that. I'm all about some of the theory, because that's important, and how you get buy-in from your, you know, senior colleagues. But it's then also about, how can I go back to my day-to-day and actually do one or two things that are going to make a big difference. So I hope that that's what people will get from my session.
Yeah, excellent. And during this COVID lockdown period, when the Citizen team have all become agile, including yourself, how has comms been in, and you know, tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you faced over the last 5 months as head of comms, soon to be director of comms?
Thanks again. We're definitely sending this to Kevin. Yeah, it has. I think it's challenged everyone, hasn't it? You know, and I think housing comms professionals have had their fair share of challenges over the last sort of couple of years, really, when you think back to everything that's happened. But particularly these last 4 months, I think it was the abruptness of it. So in you know, sort of our experience was that we literally just delivered our staff conference, the first one we've ever done as Citizen, where we brought 1,000 colleagues together. We created, that was an awesome day. And then literally, I think within 10 days, we were basically, all of us were told to leave the office, and I think we moved to emergency repairs only shortly after that. So it was really abrupt, you know, change that no one could have seen coming, really. Yeah. It was something on the horizon, I think, coronavirus, wasn't it, for all of us? And then suddenly it just hit us head on.
You had your rebrand in amongst, because you just changed name as well, and so this was in mid-flow basically. So that, if it wasn't enough to just have that anyway, in mid kind of planning of your rebrand, it'd be interesting to hear how you kept the momentum that you'd obviously built up at the beginning as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It could have been, and I tell you what, you think back and you kind of think, you know, I mean, obviously from a purely self-involved point of view for a moment, it could have been a lot worse for us. So, you know, you think if it had come a couple of weeks earlier, we would have had to cancel the conference, which I know other housing providers and other organisations will have had to have done. I've heard of those, and I really feel for them, because I know how much work goes into that. For us, the rebrand had been completed September of the previous year. So, you know, I imagine, my God, if we'd been gearing up to launching the website or whatever, and this had happened, I think we would have just had to make some very difficult decisions about, you know, maybe just extending the period which it took for us to rebrand. So thankfully, that was kind of that was sort of out of the equation in a sense. I think the big thing we have had to adjust with, though, is that we used our staff conference to launch the headline objectives of our business strategy. So when we created all this energy, and you guys actually did some work for us with some amazing Infinity Fold handouts that we gave out there. We really got people bought into, here's the narrative that sits behind our plan for the next 3 years. And then, of course, we come back and that's just completely cut off, because we had to basically press the pause button on that, because we didn't know what the impact of coronavirus was going to be on our business strategy. So we're now gearing up to relaunching that, on the 1st of September. But I think you asked me the question about what were the challenges, and I think the big challenge early on was informing, because I think there were lots of, all of us were in a place where we didn't really know what was happening. We didn't know how long it was going to go on for. We didn't know what was going to change next. And there was a period where it was almost like not even daily, it was more regular than daily.
Right.
Things were changing, and trying to keep on top of that and trying to keep colleagues abreast of the latest information and pulling all together in a sort of compelling, easy to understand way was a real challenge for us. And then once that period was over, I think it was about how you engage teams, because obviously for lots of our staff, about sort of 500, so more than half, they suddenly were working from home, not having any interaction with colleagues, and that's tough. And not only that, but of course we were in lockdown for a while, weren't we, where everybody was working from home, but then not having contact with people outside of work as well. So we had to think, what are some ways that we can sort of replace that interaction you would have had from day to day and give people things to do. So we've been doing lots of work to do that. And just kind of even things like well-being sessions, and setting up virtual, I know other organisations have done this as well, kind of personal training sessions and well-being Wednesdays we now do. So we do yoga and mindfulness and things like that. But it's steadied, hasn't it, now? But that initial period was a frantic period of how do we get this information together? How do we coordinate it was a massive challenge, because if you don't coordinate it, it suddenly becomes all over the place and people aren't clear on things. But I think we managed it. We managed it as best that we could, and I think everybody had to do that. There was no perfect way of doing it, and I think we've certainly feels like we're coming through the other side of it with one eye on what's going to happen, because it's not over, is it? We're just hopeful that we don't go back to where we were before, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's some really interesting perspectives and challenges that you've overcome in that period. So I know that from our work with you, from a resource perspective, you sent out a physical mail pack to colleagues. Tell us more. What was the campaign about, and more importantly, in this world of digital transformation, why did you choose print for that message?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think again, I suppose the thought process was, we've had staff. So we did this about a month ago, in July, early July, I think it was. The thought process was, we've had lots of staff working from home for the best part of, by that point, 4 months. We've also had lots of people out in communities working extremely hard in very difficult circumstances. So we've got a 400 strong team of maintenance operatives out there doing repairs. Obviously they had safety concerns. They've had to adjust to new ways of working. It's been a very uncertain and difficult period for everyone, and we basically just wanted to say thank you. We have obviously done huge amounts of digital stuff. Most of the stuff that we've done, we introduced live Q&As, we've introduced new hubs on our intranet. We've done all sorts of things to engage with people from a digital sense, because I think realistically that's how you have to do it from day to day. But we did think, how about we just send a little something to staff? Because I think there is something about just picking something up and knowing that your employer has taken the time to send it to you. You guys made it look incredibly sharp, on brand, and it was personalised as well, which was fantastic. We had loads of amazing feedback from that. And I think it was a surprise. We haven't talked about it, we haven't teed it up.
Yeah.
So for most people, their reaction would have been, open their porch, see that there's a package there from us that just said nothing more than, thank you for the last few months. Thank you for doing everything that you're doing to keep us on track. We know this has been a really difficult situation, and here's just a few goodies. So we had in there, we had some biscuits, and we had some, I think, bar of chocolate and some nice tea. and a healthy snack, because obviously we wanted to,
keep the
not
balance.
just exactly, not send people all sugar. And you know what, the response was phenomenal. In fact, it's the best thing I've ever seen in terms of a reaction from staff. And we didn't know for sure. Obviously you do these things and you think, well, I think they'll go down well, and it went down incredibly well. We were bowled over actually by the response we got from it. But that was the logic behind the choice of print, I think, is that sometimes there's just no substitute to having something in your hand and opening it and feeling it and knowing that somebody's taken the time to send that to you.
That's great, and it's good that it complemented the, as you mentioned, the digital messages from a day-to-day perspective. So it's complementary rather than a substitute there, which is the role that, as part of any integrated marketing campaign, there's all the channels available and you use them. You mentioned it was successful, and as with any campaign spend, because it's no different to any other campaign, the success was measured in terms of, as you've mentioned already, the feedback that you got from people. And I know it was shared openly on social, and you mentioned to me previously on the intranet as well. Did you do any other kind of measurement apart from the feel good factor measurement for that being successful?
Well, I think we collated the many pieces of feedback that we got. So we have a microblog feed on our intranet, which was literally taken over for the day. We also did a story which was just a replication of the message from Kevin, to say these should have landed on your doorstep. That had probably 50 comments on it from staff, together with probably another 50 on the microblog, lots of people tweeting it, posting things on LinkedIn. So we collated all of that, but we also did a survey of staff, which was kind of something we were going to do anyway, really, just to check in on what's our response to COVID been like. So that really would have measured the entirety of what we'd done over the sort of few months. We had an incredibly positive response from the vast majority of staff, probably the best scores that we've seen, really. So, but I think you made an important point about budget, and obviously these things aren't done free.
No.
But ultimately, any activity like this, and this is where I say we have to kind of move away from seeing it as kind of nice things to do, because the temptation would have been to just say, let's do this because staff will love it. Well, that was a good reason to do it, and that kind of sort of, I suppose, fundamentally was the reason to do it. But the justification for doing it is much stronger than that, and that's that we have an objective, a strategic objective. One of our 7 strategic objectives for the next 3 years is to be an employer of choice. And of course, to be an employer of choice, you have to have engaged staff. You have to look after your employees. You have to create a really positive sense of what it is to work at your organisation. And I think these things are integral to that. So when you look at the spend in the context of that strategic objective, you actually think this is really not a great deal of money for the immense amount of goodwill that buys back from staff, some of which is tangible, some of which we can see in survey results, some of which is intangible. And that's always a frustration sometimes with comms work, is it is sometimes quite an intangible thing. But the real sell, I think, for execs is, here's a strategic objective, here's an action that we can use to directly fulfill that. And really, I think the best result was the response. The kind of the qualitative feedback we got from colleagues was quite overwhelming, really.
Oh, that's great. And you mentioned personalization, so there was the individuals' names on there. Do you think that had an impact on that kind of attract piece? Like any comms piece has got to have an attract element to it in order to gain the attention span, however long that's going to be. Add a bar of chocolate and you've probably extended your attention span. It certainly would be if it was through my door anyway. Put a Krispy Kreme donut in and I'm yours for life. But do you think that personalization, because that was a bold move from you, because you've got the aspects of data security, the suppliers that you use, what kind of pushed you to take it from just a simple 3 or 4 items in a Jiffy envelope with an address label on, which would have served the same function. It would have got it through the post and through somebody's letterbox. But you chose something very different, like you mentioned the branding and the visuals, and to support this case study, we'll put that, we'll have those visuals and some of the social posts that you mentioned to accompany this. But do you think that from a personalization point, I'd be interested to hear your perspective on why that did make a difference, if it did, and why you actually chose to incorporate that into the design?
It made a huge difference, I think, and I think we, I think we all know from receiving things ourselves, whether they're sort of digital or personalized, postage printed stuff. When it's got your name on it, it just instantly makes a difference. And bear in mind that this pack was effectively coming from our chief executive. It was coming from the organisation, but the card inside it was a message from Kevin, because we just felt that was the most appropriate way to say thank you for everything you've done. And so when it's coming from somebody, a person, the fact that they've used your name, and people are under no illusion, of course it's all sort of merged together and stuff, but it still makes a massive difference to get, we personalised the outside of the box, so before you'd even opened it, you'd got "Hi Steve," a little something to say thank you, I think was the message we had on the front. So you're straight away like, wow, what a lovely experience that is. You open it up and then you got the card from Kevin that said hi, name, and then the message from Kevin Rogers, which was quite amusing because obviously Kevin received one. So we got him to take a picture of "Hi Kevin, thanks Kevin." He thanked himself for all his hard work, but it did make a massive difference. And actually in the feedback, lots of people did reference that.
Yeah.
And I think it just elevates it from being something that you go, oh, well, obviously everybody's got this, and it will just, somewhere somebody just produced them in a factory, sent them out to everybody. Jobs are good, and it's a thousand,
yeah.
1,000 items, to suddenly something that just feels much more personal. And I think that little thing makes a massive difference. And I suppose what I would say is, you're right, there were some small hurdles to clear in terms of we had to get you guys to sign a data usage policy, but that's a kind of just a form that we got our guys to send over to you. You returned, done. The bit that was a bit more tricky was working with our HR colleagues to get a list of names that were known as names or preferred first name, because in the past we've had lots of issues where we've tried to do things with first names and people have said, well, only my mum calls me that. And actually, if you're I said right from the start, if we're going to personalize it, it needs to be what people want to be known as, because otherwise it's just not, if everybody knows you as Matt and you get "Hi Matthew," you're just going to go, well, that's just been taken from a database. So we had to take that on. But again, it was just a few emails, a call back and forth, and we got to a place where we did have a preferred name field. We drew that data off, we got it across to you guys, and you did the rest. So for a small amount of effort, you get immense payoff, I think, for those little things. Yeah. It's the attention to detail, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's quite interesting, Steve, because in an external comms campaign, we look at communications preferences of our customers, and also salutation. What do you prefer to be called? And internal comms, that's probably not something that's actually done. So that's something maybe others, in terms of sharing best practice, there's probably a good point in there to make. When was the last time you asked individuals, and colleagues and department managers would know that, but when it came to doing a company-wide marketing campaign to that group of individuals, would you have that salutation preferred first name field? Probably not. And if people have, then good luck. But if it was your customers, it's kind of a default question on a customer survey anyway. So it's probably something to take out from that for the listeners, that they should investigate.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think two things to say about that is, one, the fact that we did this has actually had a bit of a legacy, because I'm now working with IT and HR to get access to that list. So when we do staff emails right now, we haven't used names, because we have had that issue constantly, that issue of, well, we can only use long names, we haven't got preferred names. So now I know this list exists. I'm now getting, what we're going to do is we'll have a system where we can just go on anytime we're sending an email off, and we'll draw that list off, a live up-to-date list. And that will mean that we are able to personalize emails, and I think that will make a huge difference. I think the other point there is you quite rightly made the distinction between internal and external comms. And again, it frustrates me that we make this effort for our customers, because quite rightly so, they deserve it. But why don't our staff deserve it? it's almost like, yeah, but it's only going to staff. Well, again, it comes back to the point of please put as much effort into the way you communicate with your colleagues as you do your customers, because your colleagues are a projection of how you do that. So if you're not engaging your staff and you're not taking the time to do these little things that make a big difference, your customer will feel that at the other end. It's just inevitable. So it's a really important thing, and you're right, we do have to challenge ourselves to do these little things better.
Well, I might put that out to the CommsHero community and ask them that question. I might do a Twitter poll later on today, and just gauge the feedback. And I would be pleasantly surprised if the majority of people did collect that kind of information. And I'm sure you've got access to that now, and I'm sure it will form part of any new colleague induction pack where you're asking that information at the front end and it's populated into the database as you would do with a customer. So no, that's great that the personalization did make a difference. I know from my experience in marketing and print that it does, seeing your name in print, not just through a clear window in a DL envelope in a formal environment from a bank, but actually in the design and incorporate, it does make a huge difference. And it certainly will get, it's far more likely to make people pick the pack up and engage with it, and then the copy and everything has to do its job thereafter, but certainly from a track piece it will do it. So really interesting perspectives. Then to just round up then, Steve, what advice would you give to other CommsHero people for their comms and marketing plans in the year ahead, which is still unknown? So somebody with your experience, it'd be great to get some pearls of wisdom as to what you think people should be considering in their future plan.
Yeah, so really, I mean, that is a very, very that's a very challenging question that everybody's going to have to look at, I think. And I think I think you will get real insight on that at the CommsHero week, because I think fundamentally you're going to kind of explore all those different areas. I think I guess I would say that what you're going to have to do is consider how you're going to do all of the activity that you would normally do, probably in a digital environment for the foreseeable future. I mean, we don't know, there's kind of, the government's talking about getting people back to offices and stuff, but I think for us, we've made no firm decisions on this. But I can't see us going back in number anytime soon. And even when we do go back, it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same again, because we've it's opened up so many possibilities for us. And I think it's opened up, this has been a situation that no one would have wanted, but what it has done is kind of say, could we do things differently? And I think the answer is we absolutely can. And I think what you've got to do, I think one of the big challenges over the coming year is how do you incorporate the good things you've been able to do over the last few months into your ongoing work, because I think to lose that opportunity would be massive. So if I think about, I'm about to, later this afternoon, I'm going to do a live Q&A with our staff, and we're bringing in the experts who've done a survey for us on the future of our workplace. So the future of our working, what staff have said about how they'd like to work going forward. And that's how we're going to reveal the results. And then we'll have that as a recording afterwards with an article. I think about how we would have had to do that before. It would have just been the article. And suddenly we're able to do a live session, which we've had about 150 people sign up to. We're able to record that so everybody else can watch it afterwards. It really has kind of completely enriched the way that we talk to colleagues and engage colleagues. And then, you could say the same for customers, really, to an extent, is how do we use those tools? So we're looking at, a new means of doing customer involvement. How do we use those tools to potentially have a customer board that may be entirely digital, because that suits people much more. I think we just have to challenge ourselves to say, let's not go back to normal. And then, of course, there's the challenge, which is, you look at customers in particular, particularly our customers, if I take our customers in social housing, they're going to go through a really difficult time. They're already, lots of them are already in more challenging circumstances, and lots of them are going to be face redundancies, and lots of them are going to have real challenges in their life. How do we support them? How do we communicate with them in a way that kind of works with that? and kind of meets their new expectations about the way they receive services and the way they're communicated with about services, because the bar has been raised by other organizations. Some of the service that I've received during lockdown online from other customer service organizations has been incredible. And that's because the people have had to invest in that even more. And I think we've always been a little bit behind the curve. So now we really got to kind of say, how do we really step up? We've been doing some work to help our customers self-serve more online, and we'll be continuing to do that. So all sorts of challenges, but the number one thing for me is, let's take the positives of the last 4 months and let's not throw them to one side and go back to the way we used to do things, because that would be a terrible waste for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, Stephen. Thank you for your time and what was definitely an insightful and very interesting interview. And I'm sure all the CommsHero listeners, there's lots of pearls of wisdom and tips that they can take from what you've put forward there. And just a reminder to everyone, Steve is you'll be able to engage in his session as part of CommsHero Week, which is happening 28th of September through to the 2nd of October. And just to remind everyone, it's a virtual event with over, it was 20 speakers originally, 35, and I think we're up to about 39 at the minute. 3 panel debates and lots of networking as well. And all the full details on the website, commshero.com. And you can also follow us on Twitter at CommsHero and be part of a community of over 10,000 followers. And so thank you once again, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to getting this out there and as one of the first podcasts on the You're My CommsHero series. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Asif, and just say thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the work you're doing to share best practice. And I look forward to CommsHero Week.